welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The first Harry Potter book may seem like a light fairy tale, but it hides countless small details that become important foreshadowings of future events. On a first read, they easily slip by unnoticed, but if you look closer, each of them carries a hint of what Harry's journey will be like and what awaits him ahead. Today, let's go through the most intriguing of them. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Professor Quirrell saved Harry. In Philosopher's Stone, Professor Quirrell is introduced as a quiet and even somewhat pitiful figure. But early in the book, he unexpectedly saves Harry and Ron. The boys accidentally wandered near the forbidden door on the 3rd floor and ran into Filch, who was ready to lock them in the dungeons. At the last moment, they were rescued by none other than Professor Quirrell. At first glance, it seems trivial, but knowing the book's ending, it becomes clear Quirrell wasn't there by chance. He was studying the path to the stone and testing the defenses. This small detail is easy to miss, yet it creates an impressive echo in the finale when the timid professor is revealed as the main antagonist. Number 2. The flight to the school roof. Before entering Hogwarts, Harry had already shown accidental bursts of magic. One of these moments was when he was fleeing from Dudley and his gang and suddenly ended up on the roof. This could be seen as just another magical mishap, but it also subtly hints at Harry's future flying abilities. Throughout the books, he often uses the air to save himself or gain an advantage. Perhaps this scene was the very first foreshadowing of his talent as a seeker. Number 3. The appearance of Mrs. Figg. The trip to the zoo for Dudley's birthday revealed that Harry could talk to snakes. But the book has another important detail. Usually, Harry wasn't even taken on such outings, but was left with Mrs. Figg. At the time, she seemed like nothing more than a cranky, cat-obsessed neighbour. Yet later, in Order of the Phoenix, it's revealed that Mrs. Figg was a squib and part of the wizarding world, which means Rowling carefully wove her into the story from the very first book, setting up a character who would play a meaningful role in the future. Number 4. He was given a sock. Before his 11th birthday, Harry remembered how, the year before, the Dursleys had given him a coat hanger and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. At first, this is just another cruel reminder of the family's neglect. But right after this memory appears Hagrid, who quite literally frees Harry from his slavery, taking him away to Hogwarts. And here lies a hidden parallel with Dobby. In the 2nd book, the house elf wins his freedom thanks to a sock. Thus, the Dursleys' worthless gift takes on symbolic weight, connecting Harry's fate with the theme of freedom and choice. Number 5. His habit of spiders. At the very beginning of the book, Harry wakes up in the cupboard and brushes a spider off his sock. For him, it's nothing unusual. He had grown used to them in his cramped space under the stairs. It seems like just a detail to show the harsh conditions of his life. But it resurfaces in the 2nd book. Harry, who had lived with spiders all his childhood, faced Aragog with surprising calm. Ron, however, after a terrifying prank by his brothers, had feared spiders all his life. Even such tiny strokes, like spiders in the cupboard, become foreshadowings of future events. Number 6. The first meeting with Draco Malfoy. In Madame Malkin's shop, Harry meets Draco Malfoy before he even knows what a Slytherin is. Draco speaks with the easy arrogance of someone who has always believed in his own importance. You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. At this point, Harry has no idea what Draco means, but the reader is given a sharp glimpse of the divide that runs through the magical world. Bloodlines, status, and power are already setting the rules. This brief encounter sets the stage for everything that follows. Draco's disdain for the wrong sort is not just a childish insult, it is the same prejudice that fuels Voldemort's war. When Harry refuses Draco's hand later at Hogwarts, the choice is clear. He will not side with those who measure worth by blood. What begins as a simple meeting in a robe shop becomes the spark of a lifelong rivalry, one rooted not in personal dislike alone, but in clashing ideals. Number 7. The symbolism of the scar. When Harry meets Professor Quirrell in the leaky cauldron, his scar gives a sudden sting. At first, it seems like a simple magical reaction, but Rowling is planting the seed of a darker truth. The pain is not from Quirrell himself, but from what is hidden beneath the turban. Voldemort is already there, clinging to life, and Harry's body responds before his mind can understand. The scar works as a silent alarm, a warning that danger is near even when no one else can see it. This moment becomes the pattern for the entire series. The scar hurts when Voldemort is close, and it burns when Voldemort is angry. In Order of the Phoenix, it even allows Harry to see through Voldemort's eyes. But it all begins with that first, almost throwaway scene. A boy shakes hands with a nervous professor, and his head throbs. The line seems small, but it is the first sign of the invisible thread tying Harry and Voldemort together. The scar is not just a wound, it is a connection. Number 8. Owls as harbingers of change. The letters for Harry begin with a single envelope, neatly addressed to Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs. Vernon tears it up, but the letters keep coming, carried by owls that seem endless. Rowling writes, "On Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down at the breakfast table looking tired and rather ill, but happy. No post on Sundays," he reminded them cheerfully as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. And at that moment, dozens of letters flood the house. The owls refuse to be ignored. They are messengers of change, battering down the barriers the Dursleys built around Harry's life. The comedy of Vernon chasing owls and burning letters hides something powerful. The wizarding world is calling, and no wall, no locked door, no trip to a distant hut can stop it. Petunia and Vernon cling to their illusion of normality, yet nature itself rises against them. The skies fill with wings, the post overflows, and the order of Privet Drive is broken. For Harry, who has known nothing but silence, this noisy rebellion of birds is a promise that life will never be the same. The contrast is striking. The Dursleys' prize order, neat hedges, and a house stripped of anything strange. The owls shatter that perfection. They are wild, insistent, unstoppable. When the final letter arrives by Hagrid's hand, it is not just a delivery. It is the culmination of a storm. The owls have already declared the truth. Harry belongs to another world, and no amount of denial can erase it. Number 9. Gryffindor versus Slytherin match. The first Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Slytherin is written with all the excitement of a sports scene, but it carries a deeper meaning. When Harry takes to the field as the youngest seeker in a century, he is not only flying for his team, but for the very values of courage and fairness. On the other side, Slytherin plays with cunning and manipulation, with Marcus Flint fouling repeatedly. Rowling makes the opposition clear, bravery against trickery. The pitch becomes the first battlefield of the series. During the match, Harry nearly swallows the golden snitch after a sabotage attempt. His broom gave a sudden, frightening lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to be thrown off. Later, Hermione spots Professor Snape muttering and believes he is jinxing the broom. This suspicion adds a layer of menace to what should be only a school sport. In that moment, the Gryffindor-Slytherin rivalry turns into something larger, a shadow of Voldemort himself reaching into Harry's new life. The symbolism becomes more obvious with time. Every victory for Gryffindor is written as a moment of collective courage, while every foul from Slytherin reflects selfish ambition. Even in this early book, the matches act as metaphors for the ideological war that defines the wizarding world. Harry's determination to play fair, even when the odds are against him, mirrors the way he later faces much darker battles outside the stadium. By the end of Philosopher's Stone, Gryffindor's win on the field feels like more than points for the House Cup. It is a small rehearsal of what will come, a reminder that battles between courage and ambition start in the smallest arenas and grow into wars. Quidditch here is not background colour, it is foreshadowing. The broomsticks and the cheers are simply the first echo of the struggle between light and dark that will shape Harry's entire life. Number 10. The Mirror of Erised. When Harry first stands before the Mirror of Erised, the moment feels magical and heartbreaking. He sees his parents smiling back at him, alive in a way they never were in his real life. They just looked at him smiling, the book says. For a boy who grew up unloved and unwanted, it is overwhelming. The mirror does not show the future or even reality. It shows the deepest longing of the heart. For Harry, that longing is family. The detail seems simple, but it reveals his most fragile wound. Dumbledore warns him of its danger. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, remember that, he says gently. Here the mirror shifts from being a comfort to a threat. The director explains that men have wasted away in front of it, unable to leave their visions. The warning plants a seed. Desire can be as destructive as dark magic. This is not only about Harry's grief, but about the wider truth of the wizarding world. The mirror whispers that obsession blinds, whether the object is love, power, or even immortality. The motif returns in later struggles. Think of the Philosopher's Stone itself. Voldemort desires it for eternal life. Harry desires only to keep it safe. The mirror chooses accordingly. In Deathly Hallows, the same theme rises again. Voldemort hunts Horcruxes for power, while Harry learns to let go even of his own life. The lesson of the Mirror of Erised, wanting too much can destroy you, echoes through the entire series. It also marks Harry's growth. As a child, he lingers before the mirror, lost in longing. But as he grows older, he learns to walk away from dreams when reality calls. By the end, he stands in the Forbidden Forest ready to die, not clinging to illusions, but embracing sacrifice. The mirror was his first test of desire. It showed that what we want most is often what we must resist, because true strength lies not in holding on, but in letting go. Number 11, Dumbledore's Scar of the London Underground. On the chocolate frog card, young Harry reads about Albus Dumbledore. The description lists his achievements, from defeating the dark wizard Grindelwald to his work with Nicholas Flamel. Then comes the oddest line. He is particularly famous for his discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling. He also has a scar above his left knee, which is a perfect map of the London Underground. It is a strange image, so strange that most readers let it slip by as a joke. But the scar is not a random flourish. It quietly links Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of his age, to the world Harry thought he left behind. The London Underground is a symbol of ordinary life. It is noise, trains, people going to work. Why would a wizard's scar take its shape? Perhaps it suggests that even Dumbledore, a man who seems above the everyday, carries the imprint of the Muggle world. He is not untouchable. He is scarred, marked, part of both realities. This tiny detail foreshadows what Harry will learn again and again. The magical and the mundane are never truly separate. The boy who sleeps under the stairs must still walk into a school of spells, and the man who beats Grindelwald still bears a scar shaped like the paths of London commuters. It also fits Dumbledore's role as a bridge between worlds. He welcomes Harry into magic with warmth, but never pretends that the non-magical world is meaningless. Remember how he tells Harry at King's Cross in Deathly Hallows, "Of course it is happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean it is not real?" Dumbledore has always carried that philosophy. His scar, like the underground map, is a reminder that journeys cross boundaries and no world erases the other. The scar's humour hides something serious. Rowling gives the mightiest wizard a flaw that connects him to ordinary people. He is powerful, yes, but also marked, scarred, human. For Harry, who struggles to reconcile two identities, this detail is a quiet promise. The boy from Privet Drive and the chosen one of prophecy are not two halves to be fought over. They are one life, connected by scars, by paths, by maps that stretch across both worlds. Number 12, Hagrid and his pink umbrella. Hagrid's pink umbrella looks like a harmless quirk, almost a joke. Yet inside it are the broken fragments of his wand, hidden ever since he was expelled from Hogwarts. When Harry first notices it, the object seems odd and even humorous, but for Hagrid it is a lifeline. He was denied his right to practice magic after being accused of opening the Chamber of Secrets, but the umbrella shows that he never truly surrendered that part of himself. It is his silent protest, a stubborn way of saying that even stripped of titles, he is still a wizard. The umbrella is not just a tool. It is a wound that Hagrid carries everywhere. Think of the moment in Philosopher's Stone when he taps it against the door of the hut on the rock and makes it fly open. "There's magic in you, boy, and it's time ye learnt about it," he tells Harry. Here, Hagrid is both guardian and rebel. He risks breaking wizarding law to prove a point. No ministry decree, no broken wand can erase who he is. The umbrella works because it carries pieces of his old life, a reminder that injustice was done to him. This detail becomes heavier when you know Hagrid's past. He was only a third year when Tom Riddle framed him. Expelled, humiliated, and branded dangerous, Hagrid should have been crushed. Instead, he rebuilt his identity around kindness and loyalty. His umbrella is the perfect symbol of that resilience. It hides brokenness, but it also radiates quiet strength. Like Hagrid himself, it looks clumsy, even laughable, but it contains a power that refuses to die. Later books echo this truth. Prejudice in the wizarding world is a constant theme. Half-giants like Hagrid are mocked, distrusted, even feared. Yet he walks openly with his pink umbrella, as if daring the world to judge him. It is his declaration, "You can break my wand, but you will not break me." Through this small detail, Rowling reminds us that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is carried in the hand of a man who, against all odds, still chooses to protect others. Number 13, the first mention of Nicholas Flamel. Of all the little treasures hidden in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, one of the most overlooked appears not in a grand revelation or a climactic duel, but in a small moment on the Hogwarts Express. When Harry opens his very first chocolate frog card, he is not only being introduced to the magical world's fascination with collectible figures, but also to a name that will later shape the entire story's central mystery, Nicolas Flamel. At that moment, readers are still absorbing the wonder of spells, charms, and magical sweets. It is easy to treat the card as nothing more than playful decoration. Yet Rowling is planting a seed, one that will bloom into the ultimate revelation about the Philosopher's Stone. The genius of this technique lies in its subtlety. By slipping the name into a casual context, Rowling both distracts and intrigues, weaving the clues so seamlessly into the fabric of the story that many miss its importance. The chocolate frog card itself is described with childlike enthusiasm as Harry reads the biography of Albus Dumbledore. The text notes that Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for his discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicolas Flamel. To a new reader, those are just fascinating tidbits, pieces of world-building that add weight to Dumbledore's legend. The mention of Grindelwald, dragon's blood, and alchemy appear equally mysterious. But hidden among them is the key detail. Dumbledore has a partner named Nicolas Flamel. Rowling's strategy is clear. She disguises her clue by surrounding it with equally dazzling information, encouraging the reader to marvel at the grand tapestry of magical history instead of isolating the single thread that matters. The mastery of this moment becomes apparent only when the story develops further. The central plot of the first book revolves around the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary object capable of producing the elixir of life and turning any metal into pure gold. The stone's true guardian, as revealed later, is Nicholas Flamel himself, the very same man mentioned so casually on that train ride. By the time Harry, Ron, and Hermione stumble across his name again in their own research, the reader may barely remember the chocolate frog card. That is precisely why the revelation feels so clever. Rowling had told us all along, but in such a natural and unassuming way that most readers overlooked it. This is storytelling that rewards careful attention. What makes this moment even more effective is its placement. The chocolate frog scene occurs before Harry has even reached Hogwarts. At that stage, the young hero knows nothing of magic beyond Hagrid's brief introduction. He has never heard of alchemy, much less imagined the existence of a Philosopher's Stone. The detail, therefore, has no immediate context for him, nor for the reader. It floats as background colour, delightful but seemingly irrelevant. Only later, when the trio desperately seeks answers, does the significance of Flamel crystallize. Rowling thus mirrors the experience of discovery. Information that once seemed trivial suddenly becomes crucial when circumstances change. The effect is almost cinematic. Imagine a camera lingering briefly on a photograph pinned to a wall early in a film, then cutting away before the viewer attaches meaning to it. Hours later, when the hero uncovers a conspiracy, that same photograph resurfaces, now glowing with relevance. Rowling uses the same sleight of hand, training her readers to trust her details while distracting them with wonder. It is not deception, but rather literary misdirection. She is teaching us that in her world, every passing name and line may matter more than it first appears. The brilliance of Flamel's introduction also lies in the blending of real-world history with fiction. Nicolas Flamel was not an invention of Rowling. He was a historical figure from 14th century Paris, rumoured in legends to have discovered the Philosopher's Stone. Alchemists across Europe whispered his name for centuries, attaching mystical properties to his reputation. By inserting him into Dumbledore's biography, Rowling anchored her fantasy in a soil of real myth, making the magical world feel both richer and eerily plausible. The unsuspecting reader might assume that Flamel is merely another wizard created for the series, but those with curiosity or later research discover that he belongs to humanity's own history of magical speculation. For Harry, however, Flamel's name becomes a riddle. When the trio overhears Hagrid accidentally reveal that someone is guarding something very secret inside Hogwarts, their investigation begins. They know the object is important, but they lack a name. The search through the library, Hermione's frustrated scouring of the restricted section, and their eventual breakthrough all circle back to one fact. The clue had been given to Harry on his very first journey to Hogwarts. The chocolate frog card becomes more than a collectible. It is the narrative bridge that ties Harry's personal introduction to magic with the central plotline of the book. Rowling ensures that nothing in her world exists without purpose. The quote itself captures this layering of meaning. When Harry reads the card, the words appear ordinary. Dumbledore is particularly famous for his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. There is no emphasis, no dramatic pause. But when Hermione later announces triumphantly that Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone, the earlier mention transforms in hindsight. Readers suddenly recall the train ride and the shock is doubled. The answer had been within reach all along. This is a classic example of Chekhov's gun, the principle that if a detail is introduced in the first act, it must return in the third. Rowling loads the gun with Flamel's name in Chapter 6 and fires it with precision in the climax. Number 14, Neville's Remembrall. Under the bright, enchanted light of the Great Hall, Neville Longbottom fumbled nervously with a small glass sphere. The object, no bigger than a snitch, was cloudy inside, as if smoke had been trapped in it. His grandmother had sent it to him, and it was called a Remembrall. When Neville held it in his palm, the glass filled with red, glowing like a warning signal. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the moment is written almost in passing. The ball turned scarlet. "You've forgotten something." Neville was trying to remember what he'd forgotten. What he had actually forgotten is never revealed in the text. At first glance, it looks like a small gag, an amusing detail to highlight Neville's clumsiness. Yet on deeper reflection, this moment carries with it a strange weight, a foreshadowing of themes that run through his entire story. The Remembrall itself is a clever invention. It does not tell the owner what they have forgotten, only that something is missing. For Neville, who is already portrayed as shy and absent-minded, it becomes both a symbol of his insecurity and a quiet prophecy about his life. At that table, in his first year, Neville looks helpless, his cheeks flushed as the ball glows red. The reader might laugh lightly, as many do, moving quickly on to the more obvious drama of Harry and Draco Malfoy's confrontation with broomsticks. But in that overlooked moment, Rowling plants a mystery. The question lingers, even if unspoken: what exactly had Neville forgotten, and why? Was it left unanswered? In the film version, the directors solved the problem with humour. Neville mutters that he has forgotten his cloak, providing a quick, amusing answer for the audience. But the book refuses to close the gap. It leaves the reader with uncertainty, and uncertainty is where symbolism thrives. This silence invites interpretation. Perhaps Neville forgot a trivial item, a sock or a quill. Or perhaps the forgotten thing was something deeper, something he could not consciously recognize at the time, a forgotten identity, a hidden truth about his family, a role he was meant to play in the war against Voldemort. What makes this detail even more powerful is Neville's relationship with memory itself. Later in the series, we learn about his parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, who were tortured by Bellatrix Lestrange and other Death Eaters until their minds were broken. Neville grows up with the weight of that family tragedy, visiting his parents in St. Mungo's Hospital, where they live without recognition of their son. The pain of memory and the cruelty of forgotten lives hang over him. When we look back at the Remembrall scene with this knowledge, it takes on an almost haunting quality. Neville, the boy mocked for his forgetfulness, is the one who carries the legacy of parents who cannot remember at all. This connection between Neville's Remembrall and his family's broken memories shows how carefully Rowling plants seeds early in the story. The device in his hand becomes more than a toy, it is an unspoken metaphor. The red glow in the glass might symbolize not just his absent-mindedness, but also the wound of remembrance, the unhealed scar of what has been lost to his family. He is a boy destined to live with the tension between remembering and forgetting. And the fact that we are never told what he forgot in that moment reflects the uncertainty of his entire childhood. Neville himself does not fully understand what his past means or what it demands of him. Neville's classmates treat the scene lightly. Even Professor McGonagall, who is stern but fair, sees him as someone who struggles with basic magical skills. The Remembrall glowing red confirms his reputation as forgetful. Yet hidden within this laughter is a tragedy that only becomes visible later. Memory is not just a joke in Neville's life, it is the shadow of a curse. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry accompanies Neville to St. Mungo's, he witnesses the heartbreaking reality. Neville's mother, confused and broken, hands him an empty wrapper from Drubel's best blowing gum, as if it were a treasure. Neville quietly pockets it, treating it as a gift. That scene, filled with silence and compassion, casts the Remembrall from his first year in a new light. The question of what Neville forgot on that day can therefore be seen as a literary mirror. Perhaps he forgot something mundane, yes, but symbolically he had already forgotten something far greater: the normal life of a boy with parents at home. He never had that memory to begin with, so it is both forgotten and missing. The glowing red sphere in his hand becomes a silent commentary on his loss. The Remembrall is reminding him of something that lies deeper than books and homework. It is reminding him of a wound that he carries unconsciously. There is also the striking parallel with Harry. Harry, too, is defined by the absence of his parents, murdered by Voldemort. But Harry is remembered by the world as the boy who lived, while Neville is remembered as the boy who forgets. Both, however, share a history shaped by Voldemort's violence. Prophecy even tied their fates together. Either Harry or Neville could have been the chosen one, the child marked to face the Dark Lord. The Remembrall scene, in retrospect, becomes one of those subtle hints that Neville is not simply comic relief. He, too, has a destiny bound to the deepest currents of memory, loss, and prophecy. Number 15. Goblins and their role. When Hagrid leads Harry through the twisting cobblestone streets of Diagon Alley, one moment stands apart with quiet foreshadowing. They arrive before the towering marble building of Gringotts, the Wizarding Bank, and Hagrid mutters almost casually, "Best not to mess with goblins, Harry." At first reading, the sentence feels like a throwaway remark, a bit of atmospheric colour to enrich the strangeness of the magical world. Yet when we step back, this line is not simple world-building. It is a seed planted deliberately, one that blooms much later into thorny questions of power, ownership, and loyalty. The remark introduces us not only to the goblins who guard Gringotts with cold efficiency, but to a darker undertone of mistrust between them and wizards that will echo across the series. The goblins are not described with warmth. Rowling paints them as sharp-featured, secretive, and faintly menacing. They are presented as the custodians of wealth, keepers of treasures too valuable to be entrusted to anyone else. In the first book, Harry sees them as alien beings, unlike Hagrid, who at least exudes rough kindness. The goblins are efficient, brisk, and a little intimidating. The line about not crossing them highlights something more profound than physical danger. It hints at a cultural divide, a warning that their sense of justice and loyalty does not align neatly with wizard values. At this early stage, few readers would pause to consider the weight of such a divide, but the warning plants itself in the mind nonetheless. What makes this moment stand out in hindsight is how Rowling uses it as an invisible thread, linking the beginning of Harry's journey to the morally grey conflicts of the later books. When Harry first descends with Griphook to the underground vaults, he does not understand that he is already brushing against one of the deepest currents in wizarding society, who controls power and who gets to decide the rules of ownership. Hagrid's words, so offhanded, become a subtle invitation to remember that the magical world is not a utopia. Beneath the marvel of flying owls and talking portraits lies tension, distrust, and histories of betrayal. Consider the specific vaults Harry and Hagrid visit. In Vault 713 rests the Philosopher's Stone, placed there by Dumbledore for safekeeping. Wizards trust goblins to guard something priceless, but they do not trust them enough to share in its secrets. This contradiction lies at the core of wizard-goblin relations. Wizards rely on goblins to keep treasures beyond the reach of thieves, yet goblins themselves are viewed with suspicion, kept at a distance, and whispered about as dangerous if crossed. Already in the very first book, Rowling is placing her pieces carefully on the board. The role of Griphook becomes the clearest example of how this casual remark blossoms into importance. When Griphook reappears in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, he is no longer a faceless bank worker guiding a boy to a vault. He is an individual with grievances, desires, and a sharp sense of justice. He helps Harry and his friends infiltrate Gringotts, but not out of loyalty or kindness. He does it because he expects something in return, the Sword of Gryffindor. This is where the echo of Hagrid's warning is heard loudest. The goblins are not beings one can casually befriend or dismiss. Their world is built on bargains and debts, on promises kept and promises broken. When Harry later loses Griphook's trust, it is not surprising. The seed was sown back in the first book. The goblins never operated on wizard rules. They had their own view of ownership. To them, a crafted item belongs forever to its maker's people, not to the buyer who holds it. Wizards see such objects as transferable property. Goblins see them as eternally tied to goblin heritage. The sword of Gryffindor becomes the perfect symbol of this clash. It is the same object that Hagrid once mentioned belonged securely in wizard hands, yet to goblins the claim is illegitimate. Rowling's narrative foresight is striking. A warning muttered by Hagrid in the Philosopher's Stone blossoms into an ideological battle in the final volume. The mistrust surrounding goblins is never resolved cleanly. Harry's victory at the Battle of Hogwarts does not heal centuries of resentment. Instead, Rowling leaves us with the sense that relationships between wizards and goblins remain complicated, uneasy, and unresolved. And so Hagrid's early warning takes on even more weight. He was not simply describing their physical danger, he was acknowledging the unspoken truth that goblins occupy a position of power in wizarding society but remain outside of it, feared, tolerated, but never truly embraced. One of the most fascinating aspects of this dynamic is how Rowling contrasts goblins with other magical creatures. House elves, for example, are bound into servitude, denied freedom unless gifted clothing. Centaurs stand aloof, refusing to interact much with humans. Goblins, however, hold tangible economic power. They run the only wizarding bank, and thus all wizarding society depends on them. Yet this power makes them neither respected nor equal. They are still marginalized, spoken of in warnings like Hagrid's, rather than in terms of partnership or friendship. From the very beginning, the goblin's presence challenges the reader to see the cracks in the supposedly wondrous world. Even the descriptions of Gringotts' underground caverns in the first book reinforce this theme. The further Harry and Hagrid descend, the more dangerous and surreal the journey becomes. The rattling carts, the twisting rails, the flickering torches, these details evoke not just wonder, but unease. It is as if Rowling is guiding her readers deeper into the heart of something that is not fully trustworthy. Gringotts is secure, yes, but it is also foreboding, reminding us that treasure and danger are never far apart. And at its heart stand the goblins, guardians of secrets and wealth, never fully on anyone's side but their own. Number 16, Dudley's Tail Scar. Of all the moments in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, few are as overlooked as the night when Rubeus Hagrid finally loses patience with the Dursleys in the hut on the rock. Harry has just received his letter, and Vernon Dursley has done everything in his power to keep it from him. When Hagrid breaks down the door, towers over the family, and hands Harry his rightful acceptance to Hogwarts, the tension builds until it bursts with Dudley Dursley as the unfortunate target. J.K. Rowling describes how Hagrid, his great shaggy head bowed under the ceiling, grows furious at Vernon's insults, and in a sudden act of magical retribution points his pink umbrella at Dudley. A moment later, Dudley squeals in terror, clutching his backside, for Hagrid has sprouted a pig's tail from the spoiled boy's body. Readers often chuckle, enjoying the justice in seeing Dudley humiliated, but tucked inside this scene is a detail that grows more significant upon reflection. The detail does not come immediately. It is only later, in passing, that we learn the tail could not simply be magicked away. Petunia and Vernon are forced to bring their son to a hospital where surgeons must cut it off. The narrative almost skips over this as if it were a small inconvenience, a footnote in the greater story of Harry discovering his true identity. Yet Rowling leaves a lasting consequence hidden inside the humour. When the tail is removed, Dudley is left with a scar, a permanent reminder of that night. For the Dursleys, who have worked so obsessively to erase any trace of the magical world from their lives, this becomes the first undeniable evidence that magic cannot be denied, erased, or controlled. It is worth pausing to see why this scar matters. The Dursleys are not simply ignorant of magic, they are hostile to it. Vernon dismisses it as nonsense. Petunia resents her sister Lily's magical gifts, and Dudley grows up learning to fear and despise anything that seems out of the ordinary. Their lives are structured around the illusion of normality. Privet Drive itself, with its trimmed hedges and identical houses, becomes a symbol of their desperate need to appear conventional. When Harry is left at their doorstep, they treat his magical heritage as a stain, a dangerous disease that must be hidden. But the scar on Dudley's body is something they cannot explain to their neighbours, something no amount of denial or disdain can erase. The permanence of this mark echoes other scars in the series, most famously Harry's lightning bolt scar. That scar represents the darkest magic of Voldemort's curse and becomes a symbol of destiny, a reminder of survival and connection to evil. Dudley's scar is far less dramatic, born from Hagrid's clumsy attempt at punishment, but it carries a similar symbolic weight. It reminds the Dursleys that they are not beyond the reach of the magical world. Just as Harry's scar connects him to Voldemort whether he wishes it or not, Dudley's scar connects the Dursleys to magic whether they deny it or not. The difference is scale, but the principle is the same. Magic leaves marks that cannot be undone. There is also irony in the fact that the Dursleys, who spend years forcing Harry to live in a cupboard and treating him like an outcast, must now live with their own son visibly altered by the very world they despise. Hagrid does not kill Dudley, nor does he harm him in any irreversible way, but the scar makes him vulnerable. For the first time, Dudley is not the untouchable bully of his schoolyard or the protected child of indulgent parents. He becomes a boy marked by something greater than his family's power to control. In this sense, Rowling foreshadows Dudley's eventual character development in later books, where he confronts the reality of Harry's world in more direct ways. Another layer of significance lies in how the hospital visit is described. Rowling notes, almost in passing, that Vernon and Petunia take Dudley to have the tail surgically removed. The word surgical grounds the scene in the reality of the non-magical world. It emphasizes that while magic created the problem, it cannot be resolved by magic alone, at least not by the Dursleys, who refuse to interact with wizards any more than they must. They turn instead to sciencing, to doctors with scalpels, to the mundane world they trust. And yet science, while removing the tail, cannot remove the trace. The scar is a compromise, a visible testament to the failure of both worlds to fully erase what has been done. For Dudley, it is a secret carried on his skin. For the Dursleys, it is an invisible humiliation they never discuss. Thematically, this small incident resonates with one of Rowling's central ideas, that attempts to suppress truth or deny reality are doomed to fail. The Dursleys try to pretend Harry's letters do not exist, but they multiply. They try to hide Harry from Hagrid, but he finds them. They try to convince themselves that magic is abnormal and shameful, but magic forces itself into their lives again and again. Dudley's scar is the physical manifestation of this theme. It is the proof that pretending does not work. Just as Voldemort's name cannot truly be silenced, just as prophecies cannot be avoided, the truth of magic carves itself into the world and leaves evidence behind. One might also consider the psychological effect this must have had on Dudley. He grows up accustomed to receiving everything he wants, shielded from consequences, coddled by his parents. But here he experiences something different, the sudden invasion of something he cannot control, followed by the lasting memory of pain and embarrassment. Rowling does not dwell on his feelings, but later books show Dudley developing fear whenever he encounters magical creatures or situations. His terror during the Dementor attack in Order of the Phoenix feels more grounded when one recalls that he once bore a scar left by magic. He has first-hand knowledge that the wizarding world is not a fairy tale, but a force capable of marking him permanently. For Petunia, too, the incident must have reopened old wounds. She had spent her life envying Lily, resenting the way her sister was chosen for something she herself could never be part of. By keeping Harry under her roof, she hoped to wall off that pain. but seeing her own son scarred by magic would have been a cruel reminder that she could never keep her family separate from the world she hated. This perhaps explains why Petunia grows even more bitter afterward, redoubling her efforts to treat Harry as if he were nothing. In her mind, magic has already stolen her sister, and now it has left a mark on her son. The scar is not only Dudley's, it is Petunia's wound as well. The incident also casts Hagrid in a more complex light. Readers love him for his warmth and loyalty, but his temper often leads to reckless choices. Transforming Dudley's backside was not an act of careful justice, but an impulsive outburst. Hagrid later expresses regret when Dumbledore reprimands him, and yet through this mistake Rowling plants a detail that enriches the story's themes. It reminds us that even well-meaning magic, when used carelessly, can have lasting consequences. This lesson is mirrored throughout the series, from Ron's broken wand mishaps to the unforgivable curses. Magic is power, and power leaves marks whether one intends it or not. It is telling that the scar is mentioned only briefly, as if Rowling trusts her readers to notice its meaning without long explanation. This subtlety reflects the layered way she constructs her world. What seems comic on the surface carries weight underneath. Dudley's pigtail is funny when first imagined, but the laughter fades when one considers the hospital, the surgery, and the scar. In that scar, the line between the magical and the mundane becomes blurred. It is not a curse that can be reversed with a counterspell, nor a wound that heals without trace. It is both, suspended between worlds. Later, when Dudley matures enough to shake Harry's hand and acknowledge his cousin as more than a freak, one can trace his journey back to this early scar. He has lived with the knowledge that magic once invaded his own body. That memory, even if unspoken, makes his eventual respect for Harry more believable. Dudley does not change because he suddenly admires wizards. He changes because he has felt, however briefly, the truth of their world etched into his own skin. Scars have a way of teaching lessons long after the pain has faded. Readers who revisit the first book after finishing the series often notice how many seeds are planted in these early chapters. The pigtail may seem small compared to the basilisk, the Triwizard Tournament, or the Horcruxes, but it belongs to the same pattern of storytelling. Rowling shows again and again that magic is not clean, not always reversible, and not something that can be boxed away. Dudley's scar is the first lesson delivered not to Harry, but to the family that tries hardest to ignore it. And though it is never dwelled upon, it lingers quietly in the background, a reminder that the wizarding world always leaves its mark. Number 17. The Sorting Hat's Warning. When Harry sits on the stool during the sorting ceremony, the moment seems simple at first, a young boy waiting to hear where he belongs. But J.K. Rowling plants something much deeper into this scene, something that echoes across the entire series. The Sorting Hat whispers into Harry's ear, pressing the idea of Slytherin, insisting that he would do well. Oh, you would do great things in Slytherin. This suggestion is not just about schoolhouses, it is about identity and destiny. It is the first time that Harry is confronted with the possibility that inside him lies a shadow strong enough to rival Voldemort's, and that the path he chooses will define not only his education, but his entire life. The reader, swept away by the excitement of the magical world, can easily overlook how heavy this moment truly is. The hat does not make casual remarks. Every word is deliberate, every hint of destiny calculated. When it tells Harry that Slytherin could make him great, it is echoing the very same qualities that Tom Riddle once embodied. Riddle was clever, ambitious, resourceful, and above all, determined to prove his superiority. Harry, despite his modesty and lack of arrogance at that age, possesses similar raw traits: bravery in the face of adversity, a sharp instinct for survival, and a strong drive to make his life meaningful after years of neglect. Rowling shows us that greatness does not necessarily mean goodness. The Sorting Hat's insistence on Slytherin foreshadows the Series-long tension between Harry's potential to mirror Voldemort and his conscious struggle to reject that path. The power of the scene lies in Harry's reaction. He does not merely passively receive the Hat's words, he actively resists them. "Not Slytherin, not Slytherin," he thinks desperately, and the Hat replies, "Are you sure? You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head." This exchange crystallizes the central theme of choice. Dumbledore later reminds Harry, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." But this message is first introduced in that sorting moment, long before Harry has any experience of Voldemort's world or the horrors of war. Already the Hat is testing him, laying bare the truth that he will have to choose over. And over whether to align with darkness or light. What makes this detail so striking is the subtle way Rowling parallels Harry's inner voice with Voldemort's. Both characters speak Parseltongue, both come from unhappy childhoods filled with loneliness, both carry a piece of the other's soul without yet knowing it. When the Hat tempts Harry with Slytherin, it is not merely talking about school pride, it is foreshadowing the revelation that Harry and Voldemort are bound together in the deepest of ways. The Sorting Hat senses that connection and reacts to it. The reader, however, cannot yet understand the magnitude of this bond and may dismiss the Hat's words as harmless tension in a school scene. Only when the later books unfold does the weight of this moment become clear. Imagine Harry giving in to the Hat's suggestion. In Slytherin, surrounded by peers like Draco Malfoy, Pansy Parkinson, and others raised in pure-blood traditions, his ambition might have been nurtured in darker ways. He might have channeled his anger at the Dursleys, his resentment of unfairness, and his longing for recognition into ruthless drive. The Hat recognizes that potential, which is why it presses him so strongly. The path of greatness is available to him, but it could so easily mirror the choices that Tom Riddle once made. The fact that Harry resists tells us that even as a child, he already had the instinct to reject darkness, though not without struggle. This scene also frames the broader theme of identity as something unstable, a question rather than a fixed truth. Harry spends the entire first book trying to understand who he is, an orphan raised by cruel relatives, a wizard who never knew magic existed, a boy famous for something he cannot remember. When the Hat pushes Slytherin, Harry realizes that even in this magical world he does not automatically belong where he expects. Gryffindor seems like the house of heroes, but the Hat insists he could thrive among the cunning. For the reader, this creates early doubt. Perhaps Harry is not purely the noble protagonist. Perhaps he has more in common with the villain than he or we would like to admit. The sorting moment also marks the first test of Harry's moral compass. Unlike later moments of temptation involving power, death, and sacrifice, this first test is intimate and internal. No one else hears the Hat. No one else knows how close Harry came to Slytherin. This secrecy intensifies its significance. He alone must carry the knowledge that a voice within him suggested he belonged with those who would later become his enemies. For a child who already feels isolated, the burden of that hidden truth plants the seeds of insecurity that resurface in later years, especially when he learns about the similarities between himself and Tom Riddle in the Chamber of Secrets. Rowling's storytelling genius lies in the layering of meaning. On the surface, the Hat's words are a suspenseful pause before the triumphant cheer of Gryffindor. Beneath that, they are a prophecy of sorts, one that shapes the reader's understanding of Harry's future conflicts. The Hat sees the fork in the road, greatness through ambition and cunning, or greatness through courage and loyalty. Harry cannot erase the fact that both paths exist within him. His constant fear throughout the series, that he is too much like Voldemort, is born from this very moment when the Hat exposed a truth he would spend years grappling with. The words, "You could be great," are especially haunting because they echo Voldemort's own obsession with greatness. Voldemort tells Harry in the graveyard of Little Hangleton, "There is nothing worse than death. Dumbledore is wrong. The Dark Lord will be immortal. Greatness will be mine." For Voldemort, greatness means domination, conquest and fear. For Harry, greatness comes to mean sacrifice, love and loyalty. The hat's prediction was not false, it was simply ambiguous. Harry does indeed become great, but he does so by choosing the opposite path to the one Slytherin offered. The sorting hat's role as more than a magical artifact becomes clear in hindsight. It does not merely categorize, it reveals hidden truths and forces characters to confront them. For Hermione, it saw intelligence and bravery. For Neville, it saw courage buried beneath insecurity. For Harry, it saw a dangerous duality, the hero and the dark mirror. This duality defines the narrative tension of the series. The reader keeps asking, will Harry succumb to his similarities with Voldemort, or will he overcome them? That question, first whispered by the hat, drives the emotional stakes of the saga. Even small details reinforce the importance of this moment. Harry's later encounters with Snape, who embodies the blurred line between darkness and loyalty, mirror the choice the hat offered. The diary of Tom Riddle in the Chamber of Secrets directly confronts him with what he might have become if he had embraced cunning and ambition above all. And every time Harry feels the scar burn, he is reminded that Voldemort's essence is literally inside him, that the hat's temptation was not baseless, but rooted in the reality of their shared bond. Readers often celebrate Gryffindor as the obvious choice, the house of heroes and bravery, but Rowling complicates that idea by showing that Harry could have been great in Slytherin too. The hat's words reveal that goodness is not automatic, that Harry's path was never predestined. The true measure of his character lies in his resistance. He chooses Gryffindor not because he lacks the traits of Slytherin, but because he does not want to be defined by them. This conscious rejection of darkness sets the foundation for all his later acts of defiance against Voldemort. The beauty of the scene is that it reads differently depending on whether you are encountering it for the first time or revisiting it after finishing the series. On first read, it feels like suspense, a moment of uncertainty before Harry is placed among friends. On reread, it feels like the beginning of the central struggle, a whispered prophecy hiding in plain sight. The line, "You could be great," gains weight as readers recognize that greatness in the wizarding world is a dangerous and morally ambiguous idea. For Harry, the sorting is not simply about fitting into a house. It is about learning that who he becomes is entirely in his own hands. The hat's words echo across Harry's adolescence, resurfacing in moments of doubt. In the Chamber of Secrets, when he asks Dumbledore if he should have been in Slytherin, Dumbledore reassures him that it is his choice that matters. That reassurance ties back directly to this first book, proving that the scene was not a throwaway moment but the foundation of Harry's identity. Each time Harry confronts temptation, whether the lure of the Hallows, the power of spells, or the pull of anger, the memory of the hat's whisper lingers, reminding him that he must actively define himself. Ultimately, this small but crucial detail demonstrates Rowling's careful craftsmanship. She hides the central conflict of the series inside a simple scene at the very start, trusting that attentive readers will return to it with deeper understanding. The Sorting Hat's temptation is not just about houses, not just about Hogwarts, but about the universal truth of human nature. We all carry within us the potential for darkness, and it is our choices that determine whether we step into the shadow or into the light. Harry's greatness lies not in his scar, not in his fame, but in the moment he told the hat, not Slytherin, and meant it. Number 18, the first meeting with Hedwig. When Harry Potter first steps into the leaky cauldron with Rubeus Hagrid, his life shifts from the dull, colourless existence under the stairs to the vibrant pulse of the wizarding world. That day, Harry experiences wonders beyond imagination, magic shops, enchanted objects, cauldrons, spellbooks, and wands. Yet hidden among all these marvels is a moment so quietly profound that it can be easy for a first-time reader to overlook. When Hagrid purchases Hedwig, the snowy owl, for Harry's birthday, it is not just a simple act of kindness. It is a symbolic turning point, a delicate signal that Harry's isolation, which had defined his childhood, is finally beginning to lift. Hedwig's arrival embodies freedom, companionship, and Harry's entry into a world where he is no longer alone. The text describes her clearly. Inside the cage was a beautiful snowy owl fast asleep with her head under her wing, a large, majestic bird, snowy white. At first glance, this reads like a touching gift, but when examined closely, Hedwig's presence radiates meaning. She is not just an owl. She is the first creature in Harry's life that belongs wholly to him, chosen not by the Dursleys, not forced upon him, but given as a gift of care and recognition. In one gesture, Hagrid gives Harry more than a pet. He gives him dignity and friendship wrapped in white feathers. Hedwig is the proof that Harry is no longer invisible. For a boy who spent his life locked in a cupboard, enduring ridicule from Dudley and contempt from Petunia and Vernon, the appearance of Hedwig is nothing short of revolutionary. Harry is suddenly responsible for another living being, one who will look at him not with disdain but with loyalty. The Dursleys refused him everything that could spark joy, a proper birthday present, affection, even decent meals. Yet here stands Hagrid, after whisking Harry from despair, presenting him with Hedwig, a gift both practical and symbolic. It is no coincidence that this moment happens on the same day Harry learns who he truly is. His new identity and his new friend arrive hand in hand. Hedwig becomes the first real link between Harry and the magical world outside Hogwarts. She is not a toy or a decorative creature. She is his connection to others, a messenger of letters, news, and bonds. More than once in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hedwig's role is not only functional but emotional. Harry, left behind at Privet Drive during the summer, writes to his new friends through Hedwig. When Ron and Hermione are away, it is she who carries Harry's words across distance. To a boy who was starved of connection for 11 years, the snowy owl is a reminder that he is never entirely cut off again. It is telling that Rowling chooses a snowy owl, not a common barn owl or tawny owl. Hedwig's bright whiteness makes her stand out, majestic and rare, just as Harry himself stands out in the wizarding world. The text's use of majestic is important, for this is how Harry first perceives her. She is not merely useful, she is regal, commanding respect. By placing such a striking bird at Harry's side, Rowling makes Hedwig a visual representation of his new identity. She is not ordinary, she is extraordinary, just as Harry is not an ordinary boy, but the boy who lived. One of the most powerful aspects of this detail is the timing. Hedwig is given to Harry before he has even stepped foot inside Hogwarts. She arrives as a companion at the very threshold of his magical journey. This means that from the moment Harry leaves the Dursleys, he does not have to walk into this unknown world alone. Hedwig flies beside him. When the train to Hogwarts departs, when the castle looms ahead, when new friends and enemies surround him, Hedwig is a constant, familiar presence. The narrative quietly reassures the reader. Harry will never again be utterly alone in the way he was in the cupboard under the stairs. The affection Harry shows for Hedwig reveals something about his character as well. Despite having grown up in neglect, Harry instinctively knows how to care for her. He feeds her, talks to her, and shows respect for her moods. In the Philosopher's Stone, Hedwig often hoots softly when Harry seems lonely or lost. She is more than an animal, she is attentive, aware of his emotions. Rowling allows Hedwig to become a silent character in her own right, communicating through movements and sounds. In many ways, Hedwig is Harry's first true confidant. An example that illustrates this bond appears after Harry is forced to return to the Dursleys for the summer. The book notes, he stayed awake, his hands stroking Hedwig's feathers, feeling that he had never had such a wonderful birthday before. The gesture of stroking Hedwig's feathers at night is not incidental. It echoes the way a child clings to comfort after years of coldness. Harry is not just marveling at having an owl, He is savouring the feeling of safety that comes from companionship. He no longer has to face the crushing solitude he once endured. Hedwig, with her warm feathers and steady presence, is the first shield against loneliness. This detail grows in meaning when contrasted with the Dursleys' treatment of Harry. The cupboard under the stairs symbolized confinement, silence, and invisibility. Hedwig, in stark contrast, embodies flight, sound, and recognition. She flies freely in the open sky, delivering letters that confirm Harry's place in a community. Her existence erases the prison of the cupboard. When Harry opens Hedwig's cage, he releases not just a bird, but a metaphor for his own liberation. Every flap of her wings is a reminder that Harry is no longer shackled by the chains of neglect. It is also notable that Hedwig is Harry's birthday gift. Birthdays had always been a source of pain for him. The Dursleys ignored his birthdays, sometimes mocking them, and never once celebrated his existence. For the first time in his life, Harry's birthday is honoured with a present, and not just any present, but one of profound meaning. Rowling could have made Hagrid buy Harry a wand polish kit, a box of chocolate frogs, or even a broom accessory. Instead, she chose a living companion, a symbol of care and permanence. This deliberate choice transforms a simple birthday moment into a milestone of belonging. When read carefully, Hedwig's first appearance also sets the stage for the theme of loyalty that runs through the series. Just as Ron and Hermione will become loyal companions, Hedwig models this devotion in animal form from the very beginning. She is fiercely attached to Harry, flying long distances, braving storms, and always returning to him. This loyalty mirrors what Harry will later experience with his human friends. Rowling weaves Hedwig into the pattern of constancy that defines Harry's relationships. There is something almost fated about the meeting. Hedwig is not chosen by Harry. She is selected by Hagrid, yet she becomes inseparable from him. The randomness of the gift carries an air of destiny. Harry did not walk into Aelop's Owl Emporium and decide for himself. Instead, Hedwig was placed into his life by another's kindness, just as many of Harry's most important bonds, his friendship with Ron, his mentorship with Dumbledore, are shaped by chance or guidance rather than choice. Hedwig represents the mysterious forces of fate that surround Harry from the start. As the story unfolds, Hedwig continues to play her part in the background, but that first meeting remains pivotal. Readers may not fully appreciate it on the first read, but revisiting the scene shows how carefully Rowling planted this symbol. Hedwig, silent in her cage, is already telling the reader what is to come. Harry's world of isolation is ending, and a new world of connection, companionship, and freedom is opening. Her snowy feathers gleam like a signal of hope, a torch passed to the boy who had lived too long in shadows. In sum, Hedwig's introduction in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is more than a simple scene of a boy receiving a pet. It is a literary device, a symbol wrapped in feathers, carrying the weight of Harry's transformation. She marks the end of neglect, the beginning of belonging, and the assurance that Harry will never again be as completely alone as he once was. Readers may turn the page quickly, eager for wands and Quidditch and potions, but the quiet majesty of that first snowy owl is worth pausing over. It is the moment when Harry Potter stops being an orphan under the stairs and starts being a boy with a friend. Number 19, The Troll and Hermione's Lie. The troll scene in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is one of those moments that at first glance can feel like a chaotic piece of slapstick, full of stumbling footsteps, clubs crashing against stone, and panicked 11-year-olds trying not to get killed. But underneath that surface it contains a turning point so delicate that many readers miss it until looking back. J.K. Rowling weaves the moment with both action and meaning, shaping the origins of the trio's lifelong friendship. The troll is less a monster to be fought and more a mirror revealing who these children really are and how they will grow. Harry Potter and Ron Weasley, until this moment, have not thought much about Hermione Granger beyond irritation. She is the girl who corrects their spells, raises her hand too often, and scolds them for breaking rules. When they mock her, she retreats to the girls' bathroom, angry and humiliated. The book sets the stage with almost cruel precision. The fight between Ron and Hermione, Ron's careless comment that she has no friends, and her decision to hide her hurt feelings. When Professor Quirrell announces in panic that a troll is loose in the dungeons, Harry suddenly remembers Hermione has not heard and is therefore in danger. It is in that instant that the ordinary schoolboy becomes something more. His choice to act, to rush toward danger rather than away from it, is the heartbeat of the chapter. The detail that defines the scene is not simply bravery, but the way each child grows into themselves by the end of the confrontation. At first, they are terrified. The book describes the troll vividly. It was 12 feet tall, its skin a dull granite grey, its great lumpy body like a boulder with legs, and the smell of it made Harry's stomach turn. The monster seems too large for children to face, and indeed it nearly crushes them both. But in the frenzy, Ron and Harry find a strange rhythm of instinct. Harry leaps onto the troll's back, grabbing hold of its neck to distract it, while Ron, trembling and desperate, manages to perform the levitation spell correctly for the first time. His Wingardium Leviosa sends the troll's club crashing down onto its own skull. The irony is sharp. The spell Hermione had scolded him about earlier, the moment that created the rift, becomes the very skill that saves them all. Hermione's role in the aftermath is where the hidden depth lies. Once the professors arrive, McGonagall stern, Snape suspicious and Quirrell gasping, Hermione makes a decision that rewrites her path. She lies. She tells them she went looking for the troll because she thought she could handle it on her own, and that Harry and Ron found her just in time. This is a breathtaking moment because Hermione has been the portrait of rule-following perfection. She had reminded Harry earlier that it's Leviosa, not Leviosa, and constantly positioned herself as the authority on the right way to behave at Hogwarts, yet here she abandons that facade, choosing loyalty over correctness. This lie marks the very first moment Hermione chooses friendship over rules heart over head. It is not simply about saving Harry and Ron from punishment. It is about aligning herself with them, stepping into their world of mischief and danger. She recognizes, consciously or not, that her isolation stems not from her intelligence but from her distance. In that moment, she crosses the bridge. She joins them. Rowling even underlines this turning point with the sentence, "From that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend." There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them. The storytelling weight of this line is immense. It reminds the reader that friendship is not built in classrooms or through polite conversation, but through shared danger, risk, and sacrifice. Harry and Ron put themselves in harm's way for Hermione, and Hermione, in turn, sacrifices her spotless reputation for them. This exchange, each giving up something precious, forges the bond. Harry, who has known only neglect and lovelessness, gains a companion who sees him as more than the boy who lived. Ron, who often feels overshadowed by his older brothers, discovers his bravery counts for something real. Hermione, who had built her identity on being the perfect student, learns that rules are meaningless without human connection. Readers who skim the scene may see only chaos, but the narrative structure mirrors the birth of a union. First comes conflict, Ron's cruel words, Hermione's loneliness. Then comes crisis, the troll. Finally comes resolution, the lie and the newfound trust. It follows the rhythm of mythic storytelling, discord, danger, and reconciliation. The trio's bond is not soft and sentimental, but forged in survival. That is why it lasts, and why the later battles against dragons, Death Eaters, and Voldemort himself feel believable. The foundation is here, in a smelly bathroom with a club-wielding troll. Another striking element is how the professors respond. McGonagall scolds them furiously, taking away points for reckless behavior, but the reader senses she is hiding admiration. Snape questions Harry's motives, seeding suspicion that will linger for the rest of the book. Quirrell, the supposed coward, was nowhere near the action, and this absence later gains sinister meaning. These adult reactions highlight how the children are already stepping into their own sphere, solving problems in ways the professors could not. Hogwarts is not just a school, it is a crucible where children are forced into adult-sized choices. Thematically, the scene foreshadows the broader series. The trio's habit of rushing into danger, relying on one another, and choosing loyalty over safety repeats again and again. When Harry later goes, after the Philosopher's Stone, when they form Dumbledore's army, when they break into the Ministry, the same pattern echoes. The troll was not simply an obstacle, it was training. More importantly, it was a test of character. Each child was given a chance to reveal who they really were. Harry was reckless but brave. Ron was insecure but capable. Hermione was rigid but willing to bend for friendship. These qualities remain their core identities, growing stronger with each book. Consider also the symbolism of the bathroom. It is a private, vulnerable place, not a classroom or corridor. Hermione hides there out of shame, crying in isolation. The troll intrudes into this most intimate space, tearing down walls both literally and figuratively. It forces Hermione out of her self-made prison and into the messy, unpredictable world of friendship. Later, bathrooms reappear as important symbolic spaces, the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, the location of Moaning Myrtle, the site of brewing Polyjuice Potion. The bathroom is a place where secrets are revealed, where masks fall away. This first bathroom encounter sets the tone. The smallness of the detail, the lie to the professors, cannot be overstated. Many readers laugh, move on, and forget. Yet that single lie is perhaps the most important untruth in the entire series. Without it, Harry and Ron may have been punished harshly, Hermione might have retreated further into solitude, and the trio might never have coalesced. Rowling writes it quietly, without drama, but the consequences ripple through the next 7 books. This is the genesis of their union, the seed from which everything grows. Looking closely, one sees how much irony is at work. Ron mocked Hermione for her obsession with rules and her condescending corrections. The very spell she nagged him about becomes their salvation. Hermione prided herself on honesty and order, yet she tells her first big lie to stand with her friends. Harry, who so often longs to avoid the spotlight, chooses to leap onto a troll's back and draw attention to himself. Everything is reversed. This is Rowling's skill to turn contradictions into revelations. The language of the scene also reinforces its importance. Descriptions of the troll's stench, its thick skin, and its lumbering movements anchor the danger in the reader's senses. But the prose sharpens when Hermione lies, shifting into crisp, direct sentences. The chaos of action gives way to the calm of choice. It is here that the heart of the story beats the loudest, not in the clash, but in the quiet courage of loyalty. One cannot overlook how this moment shapes Hermione most of all. Until now, she has been the outsider, dismissed as a know-it-all, excluded from laughter and camaraderie. With one choice, she claims her place beside Harry and Ron. She does not become less intelligent or less ambitious, but she allows her intellect to serve something greater. It is the start of her transformation from isolated prodigy to the conscience of the trio. Every later act of courage, stepping into the devil's snare, helping Harry find Horcruxes, even erasing her parents' memories, is rooted here, in that first moment of bending the truth for friendship. The troll scene is thus a paradox. It masquerades as comedy, a bumbling monster defeated by first-year students. Yet it holds the gravitas of destiny. Friendship is born not in calm or safety, but in danger, where people reveal their truest selves. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are united not by shared interests, but by shared peril. The detail of Hermione's lie is the spark that transforms the chaos into meaning, the accident into myth. Readers who pass over it lightly miss the genesis of everything that follows. The union that defeats Voldemort begins with a troll in a bathroom. Number 20. Ron's first gift to Harry. The school year at Hogwarts had been unlike anything Harry Potter could have ever imagined, from the moment Hagrid appeared on that stormy night and told him, "You're a wizard, Harry." Everything in his life had changed. Gone were the endless days of being locked in a cupboard, of receiving Dudley's cast-offs and Aunt Petunia's cold stares. In their place came adventure, magic, danger, and, perhaps most important of all, friendship. And yet it was not the dramatic trials with the Sorcerer's Stone, nor the shadows of Voldemort, that captured the quiet heart of Harry's first year. It was a single, modest moment near the end of the term when Ron Weasley offered him something small, a chocolate frog. To an outside observer, it might have looked trivial, but for Harry this was a gesture that carried more weight than gold. Harry had grown up in a house where presents were a cruel joke. He could remember birthdays when Dudley's pile of gifts towered around the living room, while his own were reduced to broken toys and half-eaten candy bars that his cousin no longer wanted. The Dursleys did not give gifts out of affection. They handed Harry scraps as reminders of his worthlessness, objects meant to sting more than to comfort. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, J.K. Rowling tells us bluntly that for his 11th birthday, Dudley received 37 presents, while Harry got a coat hanger and a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks. Such humiliations had become the rhythm of his childhood. For him, gifts were not tokens of love, but reminders of neglect. This is why Ron's act, as small as it seems, marks such a turning point in Harry's life. When Ron reaches into his robes and produces a chocolate frog, he is not simply giving Harry candy. He is giving him a piece of his world, a part of that warm Weasley spirit that Harry has admired since first visiting the Burrow. The Weasleys are not wealthy, their gifts are never extravagant, but their generosity is never measured in money. Ron shares with Harry because he wants to, because in that moment he sees his friend weary after facing trolls, challenges, and the mirror of Erised, and knows that sometimes comfort is found in the smallest things. That chocolate frog was Ron's way of saying, "You belong here with us." The contrast could not be sharper. The Dursleys' home was one of suffocating normalcy, where love was rationed out to Dudley alone, and Harry was reminded of his place in the shadows. Hogwarts, on the other hand, had given Harry people who valued him, not for his scar or fame, but for who he was when no one was watching. Ron Weasley had never cared that Harry was the boy who lived. If anything, Ron's jealousy in the early months was proof of how little he was dazzled by fame. He only saw Harry as another boy, a boy with messy hair and hand-me-down glasses. That is precisely what made his friendship so real. When Ron handed Harry the chocolate frog, he was not addressing a legend, he was addressing a friend. Rowling's description of chocolate frogs adds another layer of meaning. Each frog comes with a collectible wizard card, carrying portraits and stories of famous witches and wizards. Earlier in the book, it was through one of these cards that Harry first learned of Albus Dumbledore and the connection between Nicholas Flamel and the Sorcerer's Stone. What had once been a doorway into the mysteries of the magical world now became a token of closure, a reminder that the wonders of Hogwarts did not vanish, even after peril. Harry was receiving not just candy, but a tangible fragment of the magical universe that had claimed him as its own. It was a reassurance that life, after all the dangers he had faced, still held small joys. It is important to see the gesture in its timing. By the end of the first year, Harry had looked into the eyes of Voldemort, had risked his life beneath the school, and had stood in Dumbledore's office questioning his own courage. He had been burdened with secrets and with the knowledge that darkness was not gone, but merely delayed. For a boy of 11, such weight could have been overwhelming. But Ron's gift was a reminder that Harry was still a child, still allowed to enjoy sweets on a train ride home, still deserving of a simple act of kindness without expectation. In that single moment, the heaviness of the world was lifted, and he was just Harry again. The symbolism grows deeper when we consider Ron's own situation. The Weasleys were not rich. Chocolate frogs, though not extravagantly expensive, were still a treat, something not easily wasted. For Ron, sharing candy was not an afterthought. It was a sacrifice, however small, from his limited means, and yet he gave it freely without hesitation. That instinctive generosity defines Ron's character throughout the series. Whether it is defending Hermione against insults or risking his life on a giant chessboard, Ron's loyalty is measured not by words but by what he is willing to give up for his friends. A chocolate frog, therefore, becomes a microcosm of his nature, offering what he has, however humble, for the sake of someone he loves. For Harry, the gesture carried echoes of something he had longed for without naming. Throughout his childhood, he had stood on the outside of Dudley's birthday parties, forced to watch the mountain of gifts being unwrapped, never allowed to touch. Now, for the first time, he was not excluded but included. Ron's frog was not wrapped in shiny paper, nor was it accompanied by a cake or candles, but it was the first time a friend had said, in essence, "This is for you because you matter to me." The boy who had been denied affection his whole life was suddenly given it in the simplest form imaginable, and it mattered far more than Dudley's 37 gifts ever could. Rowling herself underscores this contrast through Harry's reactions. When faced with the mirror of Erised earlier in the book, Harry longed desperately for family, for love that had been stripped from him. What the mirror showed him was an impossible dream, his parents alive, surrounding him, smiling. That vision haunted him, and yet, in Ron's tiny gesture, Harry experienced a fragment of that dream in reality. He was not alone, not invisible, not forgotten. He was cherished by a friend who saw him not as an orphan, but as a companion worth sharing life with. The chocolate frog also serves as a metaphor for beginnings. In Sorcerer's Stone, the frogs are among the first magical items Harry encounters on the train to Hogwarts, when Ron introduces him to wizarding sweets. Back then, they were symbols of discovery, tokens of a new life unfolding before his eyes. By the end of the year, the same sweet had transformed into a symbol of belonging. The circle had closed. What began with curiosity ended with friendship. Harry's journey through the first book could be measured not only in trials and dangers, but in the way one simple piece of candy gained new meaning along the way. Some might argue that after facing Voldemort, a chocolate frog is insignificant, hardly worth remembering, but that is precisely Rowling's genius in storytelling. She reminds us that the weight of life is not always carried in dramatic battles or great sacrifices. Sometimes it is the smallest, quietest moments that shape us most. A boy who once slept in a cupboard now held in his hand a gift given freely by someone who cared. For Harry, that was a greater victory than surviving the Sorcerer's Stone. Surviving evil was one thing, receiving love was another. The gesture also foreshadows what will come in the years ahead. Ron's habit of giving what little he has to his friends continues to define him, from sharing his family's home with Harry every summer to standing beside him in battles that most would flee. That chocolate frog is the seed of a pattern that will repeat again and again in greater forms throughout the saga, for Harry learning to accept that love is as vital as offering it. The frog, therefore, is not just candy, it is the first brick in the foundation of a lifelong bond. In literary terms, the moment carries a symbolic weight that deepens the theme of friendship as the true magic of the series. The Sorcerer's Stone itself, capable of producing gold and granting immortality, is ultimately destroyed. Wealth and power are fleeting, Dumbledore reminds Harry. But the small, seemingly insignificant gift from a friend endures. Rowling asks her readers to see that in the choice between treasure and love, it is love that sustains. Harry's world is defined not by what he gains in power, but by what he gains in relationships. Looking back, fans can trace the enormity of this moment with new eyes. It is easy to overlook, buried as it is beneath the grandeur of Voldemort's return and Dumbledore's revelations. Yet the image of Ron casually offering Harry a chocolate frog and Harry accepting it with gratitude is as powerful as any spell cast in the series. It tells us that the boy who once had nothing now has something priceless, a friend who will stand beside him through every storm. The Dursleys' world of cruelty and indifference has been replaced by a world where even candy can carry love. The chocolate frog is, at its heart, a reminder that friendship is built not on grand gestures, but on everyday acts of kindness. For Harry, this was the first time he received such a gift without strings attached, without cruelty hidden beneath it. In that small moment, his life changed. The boy who had only ever known neglect now knew care. And though the Sorcerer's Stone might have been the central object of his first adventure, it was Ron's simple gift that marked the true treasure Harry gained in his first year at Hogwarts. Number 21. Keeper of Keys and Grounds. When Hagrid first introduces himself to Harry Potter in the Philosopher's Stone, his words seem simple, even mundane. Keeper of Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts. At first glance, it feels like nothing more than a title, a way to explain his place in the castle hierarchy. Yet hidden in this description is a subtle layer of meaning that many readers miss on their first journey through the book. The word keys is not accidental. It signals a deeper role Hagrid plays in Harry's story, not only as caretaker of the castle, but as the one who literally and symbolically opens the doors of the wizarding world to the boy who had been kept outside of it for so long. Hagrid's position is not merely functional, it is transformative. He is the first bridge between the ordinary and the magical, and that single phrase foreshadows the importance of his bond with Harry. The moment when Hagrid arrives at the hut on the rock is the perfect demonstration of this hidden symbolism. Harry, isolated, ignored, and degraded by the Dursleys, sits on the verge of his 11th birthday, completely unaware of who he is. The Dursleys had kept every letter, had hidden every clue, and had done everything in their power to shut the door to the magical world. Then the thunderous knocking of Hagrid changes everything. He does not just break down the door of the hut, he breaks down the invisible door that has kept Harry from his true identity. When Hagrid places that slightly squashed birthday cake in front of Harry and finally utters the words, "You're a wizard, Harry, untold," he is unlocking more than a truth. He is unlocking Harry's entire destiny. The idea of the key is woven deeply into this scene. A key is an object that opens what is locked, but it also symbolizes knowledge withheld and then revealed. For years, Harry had lived in ignorance, punished whenever he dared to ask questions about his parents or about the strange things that happened around him. Petunia and Vernon Dursley acted as guardians not of love, but of secrecy and suppression. In this context, Hagrid becomes the counterforce. His role as Keeper of Keys transforms into the figure who finally hands Harry the key to himself. When Harry is given that letter and reads the words, "We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School." Of witchcraft and wizardry, it is not merely a letter of acceptance, it is the unlocking of a locked identity, and Hagrid is the one who delivers it. It is telling that the book positions Hagrid as both the physical and symbolic gatekeeper. He literally holds the keys to the doors of Hogwarts, opening the castle to new students and securing its boundaries. But he also figuratively holds the keys to knowledge and belonging. Harry's first trip into Diagon Alley under Hagrid's guidance reflects this perfectly. The boy who had never been allowed to buy his own school supplies, who had never even received a birthday gift, is suddenly led through a brick wall into a bustling street of magic. Here, too, Hagrid provides the key, tapping on the wall behind the leaky cauldron in a precise sequence until the passage opens. The imagery is powerful. The boy who lived under a cupboard steps into a world hidden behind walls, and Hagrid is the one who knows the code. The scene in Gringotts also underlines Hagrid's dual role. He takes Harry to his vault filled with coins that prove Harry is not poor and dependent, but the heir to a hidden fortune. Once again, the idea of the key surfaces. Hagrid presents the goblins with the tiny, ancient key entrusted to him by Dumbledore, explaining that it opens Harry's vault. The image is almost too perfect. Harry, the child who had been starved, neglected, and denied, now sees wealth and independence waiting for him. And it is Hagrid, the keeper of keys, who has safeguarded this secret and ensures Harry receives it at the right time. In this sense, the key does not simply open a vault of gold, it opens Harry's first glimpse of security and self-reliance. Even more significant is the second Gringotts vault that Hagrid accesses that day, Vault 713. Hagrid carries the key for this as well, and within lies the Philosopher's Stone. The fact that Hagrid is trusted with both Harry's future and the secret to one of the most powerful magical objects in existence shows that his role is never a minor one. He is a trusted guardian of secrets chosen by Dumbledore himself. To Harry, Hagrid's role may appear friendly and almost bumbling, but beneath the surface, he is carrying immense responsibility. This reinforces the symbolism of Keeper of Keys as not just caretaker of grounds, but a man who unlocks fates and protects secrets that could shape the wizarding world. It is also important to notice how Hagrid becomes Harry's moral key. Beyond opening physical doors, he provides the boy with his first example of what kindness and loyalty look like in the magical world. Harry, who had grown up with coldness, cruelty, and neglect, suddenly finds himself with an adult who looks at him with pride and affection. Hagrid's first instinct is to celebrate Harry, to show him his parents' world, and to protect him against those who belittle or harm him. When Hagrid tells Harry about James and Lily Potter, he unlocks not only information but a sense of belonging and dignity that Harry had never known. This emotional unlocking is just as important as the literal one, for it begins to heal the damage done by the Dursleys. The irony is that Hagrid himself is no stranger to doors being closed on him. Expelled from Hogwarts, denied the right to carry a wand, and living under suspicion due to his half-giant heritage, he embodies exclusion. Yet it is precisely because of this that he becomes the perfect gatekeeper for Harry. Hagrid knows what it is like to be pushed to the margins, and so he instinctively offers Harry the opposite, welcome and entry. This contrast makes the symbolism of his title even more poignant. The man denied his own keys becomes the one entrusted with the keys of others, and through him, Harry learns that exclusion is not permanent, that doors can open even when they once seemed forever closed. One could argue that the entire trajectory of Harry's life begins with the unlocking that Hagrid provides. Without Hagrid, Harry might never have known he was a wizard. Without Hagrid, the boy might have missed the train to Hogwarts, never bought his wand, and never felt the thrill of belonging in a world that was his by birthright. The Keeper of Keys is, therefore, the keeper of possibilities. Every major event that follows stems from the fact that Hagrid gave Harry access when others sought to deny it. It is a reminder that often the seemingly small or formal details in the text, like a job title, hold deep narrative weight. The narrative also cleverly uses Hagrid's simplicity to obscure this importance. Readers are encouraged to see him as clumsy, with his pink umbrella and his fondness for dangerous creatures. Yet beneath this comical exterior lies the reality that Hagrid is the one character who never once fails to unlock what Harry needs most. When Harry doubts himself, Hagrid insists on his worth. When Harry is lost, Hagrid guides him. When Harry is threatened, Hagrid stands in front of him. The title Keeper of Keys and Grounds becomes less about the iron gates of the castle and more about the fragile gates of Harry's own heart, which are pried open by kindness for the first time. The symbolism extends further into the idea of secrets. Keys are not only used to open doors, but also to guard what must be hidden. Hagrid, though prone to spilling information after a few drinks, is nevertheless trusted by Dumbledore with secrets of immense power. The Philosopher's Stone, the protection of the castle, and even the knowledge of Harry's past, these are all matters Hagrid holds. His occasional slip of the tongue is not evidence of unreliability, but of humanity. Yet in the moments that matter, he remains the gatekeeper who safeguards what must be kept safe until the right moment. Harry learns through him that some doors must be opened carefully, and some secrets are better left locked until the proper time. What makes this detail so easy to miss on a first reading is that Rowling places it within the flow of exposition, almost like background noise. In the hut, when Hagrid says he is the keeper of keys, the reader is far more focused on the shocking revelation that Harry is a wizard. Yet on a second look, the title shines with symbolic resonance. It is one of those quiet details that only reveals its depth once the entire arc of the story is understood. We realize that the narrative had been whispering to us from the very beginning. Here is the man who will hold the keys to Harry's world, his safety, and his future. The deeper meaning of Hagrid's role becomes most visible when contrasted with Dumbledore's. Dumbledore is the orchestrator, the master chess player who sets events in motion, but Hagrid is the one who opens the gates and ensures the boy takes the first steps onto the board. Without Hagrid's loyalty, courage, and ability to bridge worlds, Harry's journey might never have begun. Hagrid is the one who moves between giants and wizards, between Hogwarts and the outside world, between secrecy and revelation. He is the threshold itself, and his title makes perfect sense in this light. Ultimately, the magic of the Philosopher's Stone lies in how such details carry profound thematic weight. The boy in the cupboard under the stairs needed a key to unlock his future, and that key arrived in the form of a half-giant who spoke in a rough accent, carried a pink umbrella, and called himself Keeper of Keys and Grounds. Or this was no accident of wording. It was Rowling planting the seed that in every locked heart, in every hidden truth, and in every sealed door, there exists someone who carries the key. For Harry, that someone was Hagrid. And from the very first book, the reader is reminded that the act of unlocking, whether it be a vault, a wall, or a sense of belonging, can be the greatest form of magic. Number 22, the first lesson with Snape. On that very first day in the dungeons, when Harry Potter sat in his first potions class, the encounter with Professor Severus Snape seemed like nothing more than hostility from a teacher determined to humiliate him. The boy who had survived Voldemort's curse was unprepared for the cold disdain in Snape's dark eyes. Yet hidden in the sharpness of words and in the chilling declaration of his role as a teacher, there lies a detail that becomes more haunting with every reread of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Snape was never just a strict professor. He was the man foreshadowed as someone whose life would revolve around death, protection, and sacrifice. The opening lines of Snape's speech stand like an incantation. There will be no foolish wand-waving or silly incantations in this class. I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death. To young Harry, who had just entered the magical world, these words carried an aura of intimidation. The description of bottling fame and brewing glory sounded mystical and menacing. Yet the most striking part, easily passed over by an eager first-time reader, was the last phrase, "put a stopper in death." It seemed then to be only a flourish of rhetoric, a way for Snape to terrify his students into silence. But years later, when we know Snape's true destiny, the phrase reads as a confession, a glimpse into the path his life would inevitably follow. At that moment, the 11-year-old Harry did not yet understand that Severus Snape was a man whose entire existence was bound to the fight against death. He was a double agent whose life was devoted to protecting Harry from the shadows, to preserving Lily Potter's sacrifice, and ultimately to confronting his own mortality with dignity. Snape was indeed the one who would put a stopper in death, not through potions, but through acts of loyalty, deception, and ultimate self-sacrifice. J.K. Rowling's choice of words in this early scene was not accidental. It was a narrative seed planted in the very first book, blooming only when the series concluded. In the way Snape presents himself, there is both menace and tragedy. He declares that there will be no foolishness in his class, marking himself as the antithesis of light-heartedness, joy and play. Already he is set apart as someone aligned with darkness, secrets, and knowledge that ordinary wizards fear to touch. The dungeon classroom, with its cold stone walls and shelves of strange ingredients, mirrors Snape's own place in the story, an underground figure operating in shadows, immersed in substances that can heal or harm. The students are too young to realize that they are in the presence of a man whose life will revolve around the balance between death and survival. Harry, of course, interprets Snape's actions through the lens of antagonism. Snape asks him questions that no first year could answer, about asphodel and wormwood, about bezoars, about the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane. The intent seems cruel, designed to humiliate the boy who had just become famous, yet even here lies another hidden thread. A bezoar, which Snape mentions as a casual test, will later save Harry's life in Half-Blood Prince when Ron Weasley is poisoned. Asphodel and wormwood, ingredients of the draught of living death, carry a symbolic meaning as well. In the Victorian language of flowers, asphodel is associated with death, mourning, and remembrance. That Snape chooses this example is not coincidental, for remembrance defines his existence. He remembers Lily, he remembers his mistakes, and he cannot move beyond them. The young Harry is not yet able to decipher these layers, nor are we as readers on the first pass. We see only hostility, not the coded signs of a man who lives among symbols of mortality. The irony lies in the fact that Snape, who proclaims his ability to put a stopper in death, is constantly defeated by death in his personal life. Lily's death dictates his allegiance. Dumbledore's impending death shapes his secret mission, and his own death seals the truth of his loyalty. His life becomes a potion brewed with grief, love, and secrecy, simmering until the moment when he must yield everything to Harry. The setting of this first lesson reinforces Snape's aura of doom. The dungeons are filled with jars of strange things floating in dark liquids, a place where death is suspended and preserved. This imagery mirrors Snape himself, who preserves his love for Lily long after her death, holding on to it as though it were bottled in one of his jars. The environment shows us his soul before we ever fully understand his choices. He is the teacher who deals not with charms or transfigurations that transform the visible world, but with brews that affect life and death, healing and poisoning. His work is always on the border of mortality. Snape's hostility toward Harry seems cruel, but it also disguises his mission. To protect Harry, he cannot show warmth, for any sign of affection would reveal his true loyalties to Voldemort's followers. The harsh questions and cutting remarks serve as his mask, hiding the fact that he is guarding Lily's son with his very life. The first lesson is thus not only a display of intimidation, it is the beginning of a performance Snape must maintain for years, where cruelty is his disguise and silence is his shield. Later in the series, when Snape's memories pour from the pensieve, the words of that first lesson return with a new resonance. We understand that putting a stopper in death was not only about potions, but about his entire existence. He put a stopper in Harry's death by protecting him at every turn, by deflecting curses, by informing Dumbledore, by misleading Voldemort. His actions delayed Harry's inevitable confrontation with the Dark Lord until the boy was ready. Snape's life became an extended attempt to keep death at bay for as long as possible, not for himself, but for the child of the woman he loved. Even the phrasing of Snape's lecture suggests prophecy. He declares that his class will not offer glory or foolishness, but instead a confrontation with mortality. The students laugh nervously or stare in silence, but Snape is telling them the truth of his world. Magic is not merely about wonder, it is about survival. The first lesson in potions is therefore also Harry's first real confrontation with the reality of what it means to live in a world where death is never far away. Unlike Hagrid, who introduces Harry to the magic of Diagon Alley, or McGonagall, who speaks of rules and transformation, Snape begins with mortality. It is a darker, more adult initiation into the realities of the magical world. One of the most striking details is how Rowling allows this moment to pass almost unnoticed in the early book. It is hidden in plain sight like many of her narrative seeds. Readers focus on the humiliation, the unfairness, the antagonism between Snape and Harry, but those few words, "put a stopper in death," linger like an echo. When revisited after Deathly Hallows, they strike with force, reminding us that the author had laid the groundwork from the very beginning. Snape's arc was always meant to end in sacrifice, and his role was always tied to the shadow of mortality. The bitterness in Snape's demeanor is also illuminated by this foreshadowing. He knows that he is not destined for recognition or glory. His love for Lily is already lost, his chance for happiness already destroyed. His life's work is to live in the shadows, despised by the students he protects, misunderstood by the boy whose survival depends on him. The bitterness is genuine, but it is also part of the price he pays. His fate is not to be celebrated, but to carry the burden of guarding life through deception and suffering. By placing this declaration in the very first potions class, Rowling frames Snape's entire character arc in a single moment. He is introduced not as a villain, but as a man aligned with mortality. While readers may initially mistake him for an antagonist, the text itself was whispering the truth from the start. Snape is death's gatekeeper, the one who can delay it, the one who can trick it, but never truly escape it. His final moments, when he gives Harry his memories and asks him to look at him one last time, seal the connection between his first words and his last. The lesson in the dungeon thus stands as one of the most profound examples of hidden foreshadowing in the series. What seemed like a harsh lecture was in fact a confession of destiny. Severus Snape, the man who brewed potions in the shadows, who insulted Harry and protected him in the same breath, was marked from the beginning as the one who would stand between the boy and death. The Potion Master's first words were not just intimidation, they were prophecy, and they defined his story until the very end. Number 23, Dumbledore's gift, the Invisibility cloak. Of all the magical objects Harry Potter encounters in his first year at Hogwarts, none is given to him with less explanation and more understated mystery than the Invisibility cloak. When Harry opens the small package on Christmas morning, the accompanying note is written in a neat but anonymous hand. "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well." At first glance, it seems like an unusual yet convenient gift, perfect for sneaking around the castle corridors. For a boy raised in the cupboard under the stairs, it feels like nothing more than a playful ticket to exploration. Yet beneath that playful surface lies a story that stretches back centuries, one of the most ancient legends in wizarding folklore, the tale of the Deathly Hallows. What readers discover only much later is that the gift Dumbledore quietly returned to Harry was not a mere tool for adventure, but one of the most powerful artifacts in existence. At the time of its first appearance in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the cloak is woven seamlessly into the narrative as a helpful device. Harry uses it to uncover the mirror of Erised in a forgotten classroom, to slip past Filch and Snape, and to aid in his first attempt to discover the truth about Nicholas Flamel. Rowling never once hints in that first book that the cloak is anything other than a clever magical garment, one of many. Fantastical objects populating the wizarding world. Readers, like Harry himself, simply accept it. After all, wands, broomsticks, and enchanted chess pieces are common enough. Why would a cloak that renders its wearer invisible raise suspicions of greater significance? And yet the brilliance of the storytelling lies precisely here. The seed of a much larger myth is planted early, but it remains unnoticed until years later when the soil of the saga has grown richer. The Invisibility cloak becomes especially striking when placed beside other cloaks mentioned throughout the series. Ordinary invisibility cloaks are said to lose their power over time, their magic fading like a charm stretched too thin. The one belonging to Harry's father, however, never weakens, never falters. Years later, Xenophilius Lovegood explains to Harry, Hermione, and Ron that the true cloak of invisibility, the one gifted to Ignotus Peverell, is unique. Unlike spells or lesser enchantments, it does not merely disguise its wearer or create a temporary shimmer of concealment. It completely shields the bearer from sight, even from death itself. When Harry unwraps it on Christmas morning, he has no idea that he holds the very same cloak described in the tale of the three brothers. What appears to be a whimsical Christmas present is, in truth, one of the three mythical Deathly Hallows. The moment of its delivery is worth examining closely. Dumbledore does not hand the cloak to Harry personally, nor does he offer any explanation. Instead, it appears in Harry's pile of gifts with only the briefest note. This deliberate choice is loaded with meaning. Dumbledore, the master chess player of the series, often holds back information until his students, or even his allies, are ready to understand it. In this case, Harry is far too young to grasp the significance of the Hallows or the dangers they represent. To reveal the truth too early might have burdened him with knowledge he was not prepared to bear. So the cloak arrives quietly, as if by fate, its true identity hidden in plain sight. Only the most attentive readers might pause and wonder, why does Dumbledore have James Potter's cloak, and why does he choose this exact moment to return it? What makes this detail all the more remarkable is how seamlessly it fits into the larger arc of the saga. In the Philosopher's Stone, the cloak enables Harry to overhear Snape and Quirrell, to visit the library's restricted section, and to take steps toward protecting the stone itself. Without it, he would have been far less capable of unraveling the mystery. Yet even in these adventures, the cloak's function is treated as practical rather than symbolic. Its mythological weight is completely hidden from the reader, just as it hides Harry from sight. The true magic of Rowling's narrative lies in this. Layering. The object serves its immediate purpose in the plot while simultaneously preparing the ground for revelations that will not surface until the final book. When the Deathly Hallows finally arrives, the reader discovers that the invisibility cloak is more than a useful trinket. It is a direct inheritance from Ignotus Peverell, one of the three brothers who supposedly outwitted death. According to the story, while Antioch chose power and Cadmus chose love, Ignotus asked for a way to live without being pursued. He received a cloak that would hide him until the day he was ready to greet death as an equal. Unlike the Elder Wand or the Resurrection Stone, both of which lead their possessors to ruin, the cloak symbolizes humility, wisdom, and the acceptance of mortality. It is telling that this is the hallow that ends up in Harry's possession, passed down from father to son, and returned by Dumbledore at precisely the right time. When Harry eventually walks into the Forbidden Forest to meet Voldemort, he does so carrying the cloak, embodying Ignotus's choice to greet death without arrogance or fear. This deep connection between artifact and destiny reframes the cloak's presence in the very first book. Dumbledore himself later admits in the Deathly Hallows, "I was fit to own the Elder Wand, but not to boast of it. I was fit to unite the Hallows, but not to master them. I was fit to pass on my wisdom only after I had learned my lesson." By returning the cloak to Harry, Dumbledore acknowledges not only James's legacy, but also Harry's unique role in the prophecy. The boy who survived is not just heir to his father's courage, but also heir to a symbol of the wisest brother. The cloak foreshadows the kind of man Harry will become. Not one seeking dominance or resurrection, but one who accepts life and death with courage. What makes this narrative choice so powerful is that readers cannot possibly recognize it on first encounter. Rowling plants a crucial piece of her ending in the opening act, but disguises it so thoroughly that it feels like nothing more than another magical curiosity. It is only with hindsight that the full picture emerges. Readers returning to the first book after finishing the series find themselves astonished at how carefully the groundwork was laid. The cloak is not merely foreshadowing, it is a narrative bridge connecting the innocence of childhood adventure with the profound philosophical questions of mortality, sacrifice, and acceptance that dominate the end of the story. Harry's early use of the cloak also reveals aspects of his character that remain consistent throughout the series. When he dons it for the first time, his instinct is not to cause mischief but to explore, to uncover truths hidden from him. He seeks knowledge, whether in the Mirror of Erised or in the restricted section of the library. This curiosity, paired with courage, defines him as much as his bravery in combat. The cloak amplifies these traits, granting him the freedom to follow his instincts without fear of punishment. In this sense, it acts as both a literal and symbolic extension of his identity, a boy searching for hidden truths about himself and the world. Moreover, the cloak links Harry to his parents in a tangible way, unlike the photo album Hagrid later gives him, or the memories he glimpses in the Mirror of Erised. The cloak is an object that James himself once used. It is a direct inheritance, passed from father to son, bridging the gap between generations torn apart by Voldemort's war. Harry may never hear his father's voice in life, but when he slips beneath the cloak, he shares in an experience James once cherished. That connection deepens the emotional significance of the gift, making it more than just a magical tool. It becomes a thread of continuity between past and present, a reminder that Harry carries his parents' legacy into every battle he faces. The decision to withhold the cloak's true significance until much later also mirrors Dumbledore's strategy with other secrets. He withholds the full truth about the prophecy about Snape's loyalty and about his own youthful ambitions until Harry is mature enough to understand them. In each case, timing is everything. By returning the cloak in Harry's first year, Dumbledore ensures that the boy has both the tool he needs to survive and the symbol that will one day define his journey. Yet by withholding its mythological importance, he protects Harry from the dangerous allure of uniting the Hallows too soon. Knowledge, in Dumbledore's philosophy, must come at the right moment, or it risks leading to ruin. The cloak also plays a subtle role in shaping the friendships between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Their early adventures under its folds, sneaking to the library, hiding from Filch, slipping out at night, become formative moments that cement their bond. The cloak is, in a sense, their shared secret, an object that allows them to test the boundaries of authority together. In these moments, the trio learns to trust one another, to rely on cooperation rather than individual bravado. Thus, the cloak not only hides them, but also draws them closer, reinforcing the theme that true strength lies in unity rather than solitary power. When examined through the lens of the Hallows, the cloak's understated debut in the Philosopher's Stone exemplifies Rowling's mastery of long-form storytelling. Few authors dare to introduce an artifact of such immense importance in the opening chapter of their saga, only to let it rest quietly in the background for years. Yet that restraint pays off brilliantly. By the time the legend of the Hallows is revealed, the cloak feels both familiar and astonishingly redefined. The reader realizes they have known one Hallow all along, and that recognition transforms not only their perception of the cloak but also their appreciation of the entire series' architecture. Perhaps the most poetic detail of all is that the cloak, symbol of humility and wisdom, is the Hallow. Harry chooses to use consistently. He never seeks the Elder Wand for power, nor the Resurrection Stone for solace until circumstances demand it. But the cloak remains with him, folded in his pocket, drawn over his shoulders, a constant companion. It reflects his deepest values: courage without arrogance, love without obsession, life without fear of death. From the innocent curiosity of a boy sneaking to see a mirror at Christmas, to the solemn courage of a young man walking into the forest to die, the cloak's presence ties together the beginning and end of Harry's story in a way few readers notice until it is too late to miss. Number 24, the first meeting with a centaur. Of all the mysterious episodes in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, one scene hides more weight than most readers notice on their first journey through the pages. When Harry and Hermione serve detention in the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid and Draco Malfoy, the forest itself becomes a stage for an encounter that is far greater than a mere punishment for wandering out of bed. It is here that Harry meets Firenze, the centaur who steps out of the shadows to rescue him from the terrifying sight of a cloaked figure drinking unicorn blood. And it is here that Firenze utters a single line which echoes throughout the rest of the series, though it is easy to miss if one is not reading with the eyes of prophecy. Mars is bright tonight. The phrase does not appear in isolation. Before Firenze arrives, Harry and Draco hear the same words from other centaurs, Bane and Ronan, who also look up at the heavens and pronounce the identical omen. To the inexperienced ear of an 11-year-old boy, it sounds like strange astronomy. Harry, whose knowledge of planets comes only from brief classroom lessons with Professor Sinistra, cannot grasp its weight. He is more concerned with surviving the dark presence moving between the trees. Yet Rowling is too deliberate a storyteller to allow repetition to pass without meaning. The insistence of the centaurs that Mars shines bright becomes an undercurrent of dread, a warning disguised as simple stargazing. In myth and history, Mars has always been more than a planet. It is the god of war, the embodiment of conflict, blood, and strife. The Romans looked at the red hue of the planet and imagined the clang of swords and the spilling of blood. When Firenze announces Mars is bright tonight, Rowling is inserting into the very first book of the saga a direct nod to the battles that will engulf the wizarding world. At the time, Harry does not yet know who Voldemort truly is, nor does he understand the weight of destiny that surrounds him. But the stars, as read by the centaurs, already carry the truth. War is coming. This moment also illustrates Rowling's skill in layering meaning. The centaurs, creatures bound to the heavens, interpret the movements of the planets as signs of events destined to unfold. Ronan's comment, always the innocent are the first victims, when speaking of Mars, is especially chilling. For in the books that follow, the innocent indeed fall first. Cedric Diggory in The Goblet of Fire is a young man with no connection to the conflict, yet he becomes Voldemort's first public victim after his return. Even in the Philosopher's Stone itself, the unicorns, pure and untouchable, are slain in the forest. Ronan's words are a prophecy disguised as a simple observation. It is striking that Rowling introduces this note of war in a book otherwise filled with the wonder of first discoveries: Diagon Alley, Quidditch, invisibility cloaks, and magical sweets. The reader, like Harry, is still wide-eyed. Yet in the midst of the enchantment, the forest reminds us that danger and destiny run parallel to wonder. The fact that children are sent into the forest at night, where unicorns bleed silver and shadows hide predators, underlines the theme. Innocence will always collide with darkness. Mars, glowing in the night sky, is not only astronomy, it is the bleeding heart of the story's future. What makes this detail so powerful is its subtlety. Rowling never explains what the centaurs mean. She never tells us directly that Mars signifies war. She allows mythology to do the work, expecting the reader to either know the symbol or discover it later. This technique rewards close reading. By the time the final books depict open battles at Hogwarts, the reader may remember the centaur's words from years before and recognize that the war was foreshadowed from the beginning. Such storytelling binds the saga together, giving it the sense of a destiny woven into the stars themselves. Firenze's appearance in this scene carries additional weight. Unlike his fellow centaurs who disdain meddling with human affairs, Firenze chooses to intervene. He lifts Harry onto his back and explains that unicorn blood can keep someone alive even when they are only a shade of existence, but that it comes at a terrible price. By linking this to Voldemort's survival, Firenze places Harry face to face with the reality that an ancient evil is rising again. When he says, "Mars is bright tonight," It is no idle observation. It is his way of signalling that Voldemort's return will not be silent or bloodless. War will follow,